This is warm-up for Depot D. I get my preview sheet. No, that's not right. Wait. 2? Oh, Depot A, sorry. Why is it, it says Depot D here. So I don't know what that is. But it's Depot A, sorry. Warm up for Depot A, Mr. Runyon for the plaintiff, Mr. Zimmerman for defense, who is examining. And the material for warm up comes from the same material. So I'm going to read the preview names now, so you can practice hitting some of these names and know, what's coming up. So the preview names are Martha, Joanne, Audrey, Joan, Chapel of the Bells, Mary, Brown, Bursinger, Brian, Tony, Connie, Johnny, Ron Pounds, St. Rose, Elizabeth, and sepsis is not a name, and it's not capped, but it's on our list. Eileen, Ruth Noonan, Catholic, Hawkins, Fremont, John, Bernard Gallagher, RN, LVN, case information form. Okay, so those are the preview words for the takes, and so just so you can practice with that in mind. All right, so to identify, I am the witness.
I am the attorney for attorney for the plaintiff, Mr. Runyon.
I am attorney for defense, Mr. Zimmerman.
Okay, hold on a second. I need to get the staple out of here. Okay. All right, and Mr. Zimmerman is questioning.
Okay, here we go. For the record, when is
Wait, sorry, this was still on pause.
Just took it one time, I think. It's probably slow.
All right, let's go.
Okay, the answer to the question by Mr. Zimmerman for the record. We're going to talk. When is the first time that you went to Chapel of the Bells?
Following my grandfather's death?
Yes, had you been there before that?
As far as, you mean having to do with my grandfather?
For any reason?
When my father died, that was 04.
Were there any problems with the?
None.
Following the death of your grandfather, when is the first time you went to Chapel of the Bells?
I can't remember. I believe it was on the day of the service.
Which would have been Monday.
Yes.
Prior to that, did you talk to anyone from Chapel of the Bells?
No.
Did you see your grandfather's remains at any time after he passed away in the hospital?
No.
Martha indicated there was a period of time that she had with him after his death. I think she mentioned the 5 minutes. You were not present for that period of time or anything similar. Is that true?
Yes, that's true.
Did you have any understanding of whether or not there was going to be some type of viewing of the body before the cremation?
Yes.
What was your understanding?
That we were going to view the body at 6 p.m. on Friday night.
Where did you get that understanding?
From my aunt.
And when did she tell you that?
She told us that, well, on that Thursday when they made the arrangements, we knew we were going to view the body, but we didn't know the time yet. And then Friday, we got a phone call from Joanne, my sister, telling us what time we could go see him that Friday night.
Where were you on Friday when Joanne called you?
I was still out. I came home and my mother gave me the message.
And that was on Friday?
Yes.
And then did you later learn that the viewing was not going to be held?
Yes.
How did you learn that?
About 5-10 minutes later, we got a second call from Joanne saying that we could not view the body because of staph infection.
Was it 5 or 10 minutes after her first message or 5 or 10 minutes after you got home?
It was after I got home. After I got home.
Did you have any particular wishes with regard to viewing the body?
Yes.
What were your thoughts?
Well, before my grandfather died, I asked Joanne, we knew he was going to die, to please make sure that I got to see him at rest, because I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but when my father died, it was gory the way I saw him. I was still having dreams about that because of the way his face was so. I particularly asked Joanne when she made the arrangements to please let me be able to see him at rest. No matter where I am, make arrangements where I can view the body, even if it's just 5 minutes.
What was your reaction when you were advised that there was some problem such that there would be no viewing?
I was very upset.
How did that manifest itself? Did you have to rest? Were you crying? Can you explain it to me?
I was not crying. I was just upset because I knew I'd never be able to see him again. It was to the point that I'd have to remember him like I saw him in the hospital on the last day.
How was that?
You want me to describe what he looked like?
Yes.
His eyes were open, his breathing, the noise was just awful. They say he was like comatose, where he was unaware of anything around him, but his eyes were open, and the breathing just looked like he was in a lot of agony to me.
In this typewritten summary, let's call it that, which you've given me, it states on page 1 that the family was to have a private viewing of your grandfather's body, and then it states, these arrangements were made especially for my mother. That would have been your grandmother, Josephine, correct?
Yes.
Especially for Josephine, aged 86, who was unable to visit because of a colostomy that was performed. Is that statement true?
Yes.
So these types of arrangements were made especially for your grandmother, correct?
No,
What's incorrect about that?
it wasn't just for my grandmother. It was for me and my grandmother.
I'm just trying to understand this statement. Maybe I can ask Mary that.
Okay.
Your mother is the one that actually typed this, right?
We both typed it.
Then why don't you take a look at where I'm pointing to? It's here on the first page. It's kind of in the middle where it states, these arrangements were made especially. Do you see that there?
Yes. If you read the second sentence, you'll see I'm right behind it.
I understand that there are other people involved, but I just wanted to ask you about that one particular statement. Is that statement true, that these arrangements were made especially for your grandmother, aged 86?
She's already answered that, and it was made for the whole family and all the relatives, but especially for the grandmother.
Either the statement is true or not true. I'm just trying to find out. I've now shown it to her, and she's read it, and I'm asking again if that statement is true.
You're leaving out part of the statement, Counsel.
She's read the whole thing.
The arrangements were made more for the whole family, including the family and relatives and friends, and especially for the grandmother's sake.
That's my question.
That's not what you asked her.
No, it's not.
You took a piece of the statement out of context, and you're asking her if that's true.
I'm taking a statement.
Rephrase your question then.
Why don't you let me finish what I'm trying to say?
Okay.
At some point in time, there's an objection that's appropriate, and at other points in time, there's some coaching involved. If your objections can be limited to legal phraseology, I think we do a lot better here. Ma'am, I had you read the statement, and all I wanted to know is if that statement, the one I've been talking about, is true. These arrangements were made especially for your grandmother. Is that true?
It's true that it was made for all of us.
Let me ask you this. In your own mind, was it more important that your grandmother get to view your grandfather's body than it was for you or any other member of the family?
In my own mind?
Yes.
Do you want a yes or no, or can I answer it with,
You bet. You can explain.
when my grandfather,
What is the response, by the way? Is it yes or no?
I can't answer yes or no unless I explain.
Why don't you say yes or no and then explain why you answered that way?
Well, if I answer it that way, then it won't be the way I want to answer it.
You can answer it any way you want to.
Before this happened with my grandfather, my grandmother saw him going downhill. She never did see him in the hospital, thank God for that. She wanted to see him at rest like she'd seen him before, but I did not get to see him at rest. I saw him in agony. So at that point, I believe that my grandmother would have wanted me to see him before she saw him.
How did you feel?
I felt that if she wanted me to do it that way, yes, I agreed with her. It was very hard not for me to be able to see him at rest.
Why?
Because the way he looked when he was in the hospital, that was just totally agonizing.
Well, the most important thing for you was to know that he was at rest. Isn't that true?
The most important thing for me, well, I'm glad he's at rest now.
Did not seeing the body cause you to think that perhaps he was not at rest?
I didn't see the body after he died.
I know. And so because of that, did you think that for some reason he was not at rest?
It's hard to believe. It's hard to imagine what he looked like at rest after seeing him like that for 4 days. So it was very hard for me to imagine, still to this day, him not looking that way.
Who was it in the family that first brought up the subject of a lawsuit? Was it you?
No, I don't know. We all agreed together.
Was there somebody that prompted the subject?
No, we all agreed together.
Have you ever sued anyone before?
No,
Have you ever been involved in a lawsuit before?
no.
Before the funeral services on Monday, did you talk to anyone over at Chapel of the Bells? I may have asked you that already.
No,
Were you privy to any of the discussions that had been between the family members about cremation and that type of thing?
yes.
The special viewing that was going to be conducted on Friday evening, did you have any understanding of whether or not the body would be embalmed?
No. Here is another piece of warm-up that is a ladder that we'll actually start at 140 and it will go up to 180 for a second, a minute or something, and then back to 170. So it's kind of good practice. We may stop in the middle just to give you a little break. Okay. So same people. Let's re-identify. For the record, though, I am the witness.
I am the attorney for the plaintiff, Mr. Runyon.
I am the attorney for defense, Mr. Zimmerman. Begins with a question by Mr. Zimmerman. for the record. My question is, you indicated to them that a doctor had said there was no staph infection, and that generated this response from them where they looked at each other.
No.
When did they look at each other?
When my mother said, "How do I know that's my father?"
I didn't know that question was posed. When was that question put to them?
After we told them about the staph infection. After we talked to them, we told them about the staph infection, and they were telling us about Ron Pounds. My mother said, "How do I know that's my father?" And they said, "Well, they come in body bags." That was their answer.
Do you have any question in your mind concerning whose remains the ashes are?
Yes,
Why?
because I believe someone made a big mistake. And I believe that, I don't want to use the word lie, but somebody sure has covered up something somewhere along the line.
Why do you say that?
Oh, dear. Okay, continuing.
Do we announce again or
No.
Okay, this begins with the question by Mr. Zimmerman, for the record. They told you that Ron Pounds was the gentleman that picked up the body, correct?
Yes.
And they told you that Ron Pounds was the gentleman that had the information concerning this staph infection, correct?
Yes.
And you don't recall whether or not Brian Toney stated that he also saw this tag, correct? You don't recall?
I don't remember if he did or didn't.
Are you saying they were trying to dodge something in your mind?
It seemed as though they were trying to wait to find out the truth from Ron Pounds.
Okay, and do you have some information indicating that Ron Pounds was there and available, but they just wouldn't let you talk to him?
No, I believe he wasn't there.
I'm trying to figure out what questions it was that you said they never answered any of your questions. Do you feel that they were trying to hide something? That they had information that they weren't giving you?
It seemed as though that was happening, yes.
What led you to that conclusion?
Because they seemed not to want to come out with any information when we asked them about this, and we told them that the doctor stated that he did not have a staph infection. When we asked where did they get their information, they told us again, Ron Pounds. It just seems funny to me that they would not know any of the information. If something happened that was that bad, that it was that bad of a staph infection, and it took from 11:02 that night to the next day for them to cremate the body or whatever they did with him, it seems funny to me. If it had to be done immediately, why wasn't it done immediately? If that was that bad of an infection, that's what seems funny to me. It just seems, I don't know what, it just seems not right. Something is just not right along the line. They may not have anything to do with it, them two. But Ron Pounds, if he knows everything, why couldn't he tell us what happened? Nobody wanted to come back to us with any answer.
You went to see a lawyer in July, right?
She did.
I mean, when was the last time that you talked to anyone at Chapel of the Bells?
The last time I talked to anyone at Chapel of the Bells was, I believe it was that time, because I didn't really talk, you know what I mean?
So far, you've gone to see the doctor, and on May 27, you went to Chapel of the Bells. Were you given any documentation during that visit?
At Chapel of the Bells?
Right.
I don't believe so. I don't remember if we were given anything at that time.
And then what did you do next in the course of things?
We went to St. Rose Hospital.
Who did you talk to? Was it a nurse?
Nurse Giannini.
She didn't tell you anything of substance. She directed you to another nurse, right?
What she did at that time was check. We told her what happened, and she said she would check. She went upstairs to the floor where grandfather died and checked with the nurses that had anything to do with it, and came back downstairs and said that as far as she knows, everything checked out okay. She then told us to call
Peggy Roth?
the next day. I don't know whether my mother called her. She is the infectious something. I don't know what.
Did you ever talk to Peggy?
I never did.
Did you do anything else personally in the course of this, trying to find out what had happened?
I don't think so.
And I asked you earlier, but I want to make sure. Did you have any other conversations with anyone from Chapel of the Bells that we haven't already talked about?
No, I did not.
Do you have some information that somebody from Chapel of the Bells intentionally made up this story of staph infection?
Written or verbal, anything at all?
From any source. You're having some difficulty with it. Let me tell you what I'm after. Sometimes things may happen because somebody does them intentionally. In other words, I may hit you in the nose intentionally, or we might pass in the hallway, or playing basketball and I accidentally hit you in the nose, okay?
Yes.
And so I'm interested in what information you have that indicates to you personally that somebody from Chapel of the Bells intentionally misrepresented the condition of your grandfather's remains.
I just feel that we were neglected. Nobody seemed to know what the other hand was doing.
Do you have any indication that someone there disliked you or your grandfather or any member of your family?
No.
Do you have any information that anyone there was doing something with the intent of hurting you or some member of your family?
I don't believe so.
Do you have any thoughts on what happened? In other words, I'm sure you've tried to reconstruct things and give it a logical sequence. Do you have some thoughts on what actually happened?
I believe what happened is that the body was cremated before it should have been. I don't know why. I'm not sure why. If we knew the answers, I don't think anyone would be here.
Let's assume that this case information form was tagged to your grandfather's body at the hospital when somebody from Chapel of the Bells arrived to pick it up. You with me?
Okay.
You would agree that if that's the case, if that were the case, then what the Chapel of the Bells people did was appropriate?
Come on, counsel. She's not an expert on embalming and morticians. That question is improper. Instruct the witness not to answer.
I'm not so sure I agree with you.
Let's try it this way. You would agree that if the body was for some reason contagious, had a contagious disease, that the people afflicted with the Chapel of the Bells should take steps to see that other people aren't exposed. You would agree with that? Same objection. She's not a medical expert, nor is she a mortician expert.
That question doesn't take an expert witness to answer.
Of course it does. There's no testimony that if a person has a staph infection before death, that they're still infectious after death.
No, my question was the body, the remains, if they're infectious.
There's no testimony by any expert that the body is infectious after death.
I'm asking her to assume that in my question.
You're asking her to assume that the body is infectious after death.
Right, go ahead.
Wait a minute. What's the question?
The question is, if that's the case, you would agree that the people affiliated with Chapel of the Bells should take steps to see that other people aren't exposed to that. You would agree with that?
I don't really know how to answer that. It seems to me that if the body is that infectious, it wouldn't have left that way.
Do you know where this form came from?
From Chapel of the Bells.
Do you know where it originally came from? In other words, who made it up?
No, I do not.
Let's assume that your grandfather's remains were not contagious, okay?
Okay,
But that somebody mistakenly indicated that they were, okay?
okay.
Do you know whether or not hospital personnel could have been involved in that miscommunication?
Wait a minute, counsel. She's not required to speculate. Question is objected to as to form and calls for speculation.
That's all I've heard so far is speculation. You would agree with me that hospital personnel were involved in taking care of your grandfather's remains after his death?
There's been no testimony to that effect, counsel. You don't ask her to assume facts and then make a speculative answer.
I'm not doing that.
You are. You're asking her to speculate on facts, not in evidence, and then to come up with a speculative answer.
I don't want her to tell me things that she doesn't know.
She doesn't know.
Let her tell me that instead of you, okay?
You're making statements based on facts, not in evidence, and then asking her to speculate with an answer. She's only required to testify as to what she knows or what she saw or heard.
Exactly.
Okay?
Not what she saw or heard, but any information she's got from any source. Now, my question is, and again, I don't want you to guess or speculate, you understand that, don't you?
Yes,
Do you know whether or not hospital personnel were involved in handling your grandfather's remains from the time of his death until somebody from Chapel of the Bells took possession of it?
I don't know.
Have you ever done any investigation into that?
Into the hospital?
Right?
We went there and asked them.
Did you ask them whether or not they were involved in handling the body after the death and until they took possession of it?
We were told that the body was taken down to the morgue.
Who did you understand took the body down to the morgue?
The nurse that was with my grandfather at the time.
That's hospital personnel, right?
That's Janini.
She worked for the hospital?
Yes,
So you understood that hospital personnel were involved in transporting or involved in handling your grandfather's body from the time of his death for some period of time until the Chapel of the Bells people arrived?
the nurse that was with my grandfather took him down to the morgue.
Did they tell you the morgue is in the hospital?
I don't know.
Do you know who handled the body down at the morgue?
No,
Were you told what happened down at the morgue?
no.
Did you make any investigation into what had happened down at the morgue?
We asked every question that we could have asked, and the hospital, the people that we talked to at the hospital, including my doctor, said that it did not come from the hospital at all, that paper, not the paper. That this Ron Pounds guy called supposedly St. Rose Hospital, and then again, they said that he received a call from St. Rose Hospital. So we don't know which of those is true. But I don't know what happened in the hospital, just like we don't know what happened at Chapel of the Bells.
Did you ask in your investigation whether or not it was possible that somebody at the hospital made a mistake and put a tag on your grandfather's body indicating staph infection?
Yes, we did.
What were you told?
No, that was not so.
They said no, that couldn't be. Is that it?
They said no, we did not.
Did you talk to the personnel down in the morgue?
No,
Did you ask to?
no, it was bad enough. Never mind going down there.
Thank you. That's all I have.